Okay, so for this one, the Moonlight Sonata theme, this is a one that has a lot of depth to it. This isn't the original version. This is a kind of a shortened version, but it's still, I think this version has a lot of depth to it and has, it can be very impactful for listeners as well if you have the right level of emotional expression on this piece. So we're going to do a few different layers. We're going to start just with the notes. So we'll go through the whole piece. We'll just get our notes down. We're not going to worry about the expressiveness or rhythm or timing or anything. Just getting our notes, and then we'll kind of go over a second pass. We'll kind of start to get more of the rhythm down, and then we'll go over the on the last part. We'll go over the expressiveness. So kind of just layering these one by one. On the very beginning, we have a D. This is a second inversion D chord. So if you imagine this being like a D, regular D minor chord, we're going to take the top note, A, move it down. So that's our kind of second inversion D minor chord. So if you imagine these being D minor, first inversion, second inversion, that's our notes here. The left hand is number 1 on D. So when you're playing these, we have a 4/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Instead, what I'm going to do is count these as just triplets. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, just so that we have a little bit more control over the rhythm and timing, especially when we have a piece that has a lot of emotional expression and depth. The way that you're communicating the little sort of subtle rhythmic qualities start to become really important. So having that a lot more control over the rhythm is really going to be able to communicate to our listener some of the more penetrating emotional depths that this piece has to offer. So I'm gonna be a little bit more specific about the timing. We're gonna go 1, 2, 3, bum bum. So we have a really, even though this is a slow piece, we want to have as much control over the sound quality as we possibly can for these types of pieces. So again, from the beginning. This is a kind of, if you imagine almost a kind of steady, gentle sort of drone sound, or this to me, at least in the beginning, sounds like a very steady state, almost kind of a drone quality. That's not boring. It's a kind of very deeply reflective, but it's also kind of a steady state kind of drone quality. So when you're playing that first line, really just get as a nice sort of smooth, steady state as you possibly can through all of those. And then we'll go ahead and start to transition these some of the other notes. Let's do right hand first. B flat, D, F. This is our B, nice B major chord, nice strong B major, B flat, B flat, B flat major. Okay, on the next one, we're gonna keep that B flat, and then we're gonna move up. This is a E flat, G. So we have B flat major. Next one, moving down. This is our notes here: A, C sharp, G. Okay, and if this looks familiar, this is actually a 5/7. If we take this A and move it up to here, this is our actually a 5/7. So imagine a D minor, and then also now this is our 5/7. If we take this A and move it down, we have a second inversion 5/7 chord there. Okay, on the next one, lift. You're still gonna hold that A. We have D, again back to our inversions here, D, A, D, F. And now we have a sustained chord, a nice sustained chord. I really enjoy those sustained chords. It kind of gives that listener a sense like we're going somewhere, and I'm not sure where we're going, but we're definitely going somewhere. What's interesting here is that these notes don't really give us our sense of resolution. What we're looking for here when we hear this note, what the ear wants to hear is probably something like a major, right? That's kind of something, but that's not really what we're doing. We have a lot more that we need to do. So what we're communicating to the listener is that we're not done. We actually have a lot more to go. So instead of having that A major, what we're gonna do is move this thumb down to G to give our listener a sense of like this is not done yet. We still have more to go. So again, going over these notes: A, C sharp, G, sustained chord, and then we're expecting that A major, but again, we're going to make that a little bit different. So make sure you have that G there. This is not an A major chord. This is G, C sharp, E. Okay, adding in the left hand notes, kind of going back to measure 3: B flat, G, A, another A. Okay, going to the next one, we have our D. Notice the fingering says 4-1. So what we're going to do is play 4. And then as you're holding this down, you're not going to lift up at all. You're going to switch to your number 1. So when you're playing this 4, you have 3 beats to sort of make that transition. So you're going to have 4, and then you have a pretty good amount of time to switch to your 1. And then we're going to go to that A. So this is, you're now back again into D position. 1, 2, 3, On these ones, you have your dotted 8th note and then a 16th note. On these particular pieces, or I should say during the period in which Beethoven was living, we have that kind of revolutionary sort of spirit. So you want to kind of make sort of a sense of that revolutionary sort of maybe cannon, it's like you're firing a cannon or something, that bum, ba-bum. So this is a little bit more of like a kind of an assertive, really hold as long as you can for that dotted 8th note, ba-bum, and then right before that next beat, you'll play that 16th note, so bum, ba-bum, 2, 3, bum, ba-bum, 2, B flat, really sort of lifting up, that we should have a sense of sort of lifting up to the B flat and then coming down. So the whole acoustical sort of sound space is feeling as if it's sort of lifting up to that B flat and then rising, coming back down. E, G, we're going to keep the E, almost like a lullaby maybe, with the C, boom. Okay. This one, same thing on 11, 3, and then transition to the 1 now. So we're going to keep holding 3, keep holding that down, switch to the 1. Now we're sort of really sort of building that tension. C sharp, D, E. Beethoven is a real sort of master of tension, being able to communicate a sense of tension to the listeners. So on this one, really sort of building that tension, sense of like, you know, the A and F. Okay, now we're going to E flat, C sharp, G, D. Okay, back down, D minor, boom, boom, rest, 5-7 again, boom, 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 rest, boom, rest, 5-7 again. Okay, the last part, these are again all inversions, so when you're playing these, imagine like that top A is coming down, imagine again that F is coming down, so what do you have here? When you have these quarter notes, sometimes it's easier just to sort of count or imagine like you have triplets sort of running in there, so 1, 2, 3, bum, bum, bum. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Sometimes it's easier just to, of course, sort of keep the same rhythm, just to make sure everything is nice and equal in certain proportions. So when you're playing those, imagine like in your mind, sort of running bum 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 bum. Okay, so let's go ahead and do left hand, kind of where we were picking up on measure 5. D again. This is again our 5-7. Back to D minor. This is a 4 chord, so D minor, a 4 chord. We have that B flat on there. On this particular chord, this is if you imagine this C going up, this is an F major. We're transitioning to that F major. This is a second inversion F major. So if you imagine this one, C going down, we have that F second inversion F major. F major, 5-7. We have that 5-7 now, broken chord. Back to F major. This one going down. We have E, G, A. Back to D minor again. 5-7. A lot of familiar chords. Okay, going down measure 13, we can go into lower G, B flat, E flat. Again, this this one is our 5/7, familiar 5/7. So imagine like this is our 5/7, A going down, D minor again. Bum, ba bum, 2, 3, bum, ba bum, 2, bum, bum, ba bum, 2, 3, bum, ba bum, 2. So there's a lot of darkness, obviously, in this piece is has a lot of kind of dark tones to it. But if you really kind of go into the content, there's a lot of aspects of it that are heroic, a lot of drive for joy or happiness. There's a lot of emotions that are sort of at an interplay. So even though the backdrop is kind of like this maybe impending doom or this darkness, there's a lot of interplay of emotions that are also sort of in that space as well. So we have a lot of different types of emotions and tensions and dynamics and all of these things going on. So there's a lot of stuff in this. Even though this is a short piece, there's a lot of stuff happening. Okay, we're still going over our notes. Let's do hands together, and then we'll go a little bit more into like the rhythm. So again, back to the beginning. Boom. We're not worrying about the expressiveness, just getting our notes, making sure everything is nice and steady. B flat. Practicing these, make sure that even though all of these are different, they all should have a nice steady rhythm as well. So there shouldn't be any kind of pauses, even though there may be expressive pauses. We really want to make sure you know where all the notes are first and have a strong sense of where your notes are before we get into the more expressive aspects of it. So really make sure that each one of these are just right on the beat. Bum, bum, bum. Playing those with the triplet, make sure that you have all the triplets done first, and then right in between that last triplet and the next downbeat is when you'll have that 16th note. So make sure when you're playing these really slow, bum, bum, that you're already done with that A now before we get to the next downbeat, bum. So you'll have that 16th note kind of right in between those, bum, 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 down together. B flat. Okay. Let's go ahead and get into some of the little bit more of the rhythm on this one. So when we're playing these, even though this is really slow, we want to make sure that the whole thing has a nice fluid quality. All of these notes have nice transitions, nice smooth transitions all the way through. There's a nice flowing quality. If you imagine maybe kind of a slow moving river that's sort of moving along, we want to make sure that all of these notes have a nice flow. We're not kind of pausing or not. We don't want to communicate to the listener that we're not sure of what the notes are. We really want to know where all the notes are. So these ones. So let's do, while we're focusing on the rhythm, we'll do a little bit of metronome. Nobody likes the metronome, but if you're a student of mine, you know that I use the metronome a lot on these. So this one, let's do, this is going to be per quarter note. Let's do maybe 60. Bum, 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 bum. When you're practicing, you can go as low as you need to. You can do 50, 40, 30 per quarter note. For this video, just to kind of shorten it a little bit, I'm going to do 60. Let's give that a try and we'll see kind of what happens. Also, too, when we get into the expressiveness of it, what you're going to have are these little sort of micro rhythmic changes in order to sort of accommodate for more expressiveness. When you get to pieces that are very expressive, very dynamic, you're going to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more kind of liberal with the rhythm. It's not going to be like steady, like right on. You're going to have a little bit of gaps. So sometimes there's a little bit of like a wait or a pause. There's a very important difference between an intentional pause when you're intentionally pausing and a kind of a uncertainty, not knowing what the notes are kind of pause. We want to make sure that we're communicating that it's an expressive pause, an intentional expressive pause, not an unintentional, not sure where our notes are pause. So making sure that we know the difference between those is going to really, let the listener know that we're in control of the notes. We know where things are going. We're intentionally making a kind of expressive, sort of rhythmic pause to kind of hold up a little bit and then kind of moving again. So again, getting back to the river analogy, when the water's sort of maybe hitting a little bit of a pause, a bit kind of lingering a little bit, maybe on where some of these notes are and what they mean, and then sort of moving on to the next place. So if there is a little bit of a pause or maybe a hesitation with some of the notes, that's intentional. I'm going to be a little bit more kind of liberal with this piece and the rhythm. So when we start from here, if you hear that, that's probably going to be intentional. B flat. Two, three. Bum, bum, 1, 2, bum, bum, 3, 4. Okay, so when you're playing, with the metronome, I was probably playing right on more so than I was expecting, but definitely when you're starting, do exactly that. Don't worry about the expressiveness, just like right on, like all with the beat, just to make sure that you have a strong technical control, not only just about the notes, but also a strong control over the rhythm as well. Okay, let's get into the expressiveness. On these ones, what we want to do is there's a few different things going on. Is with Beethoven, Beethoven has a lot of strength. There's a lot of kind of core strength, a lot of sort of rebellious, very high energy with Beethoven. But that doesn't mean that he can't compose something that's slow. So this is, obviously a very slow, very gentle, very deep, reflective piece where one is really sort of thinking deeply about one's own, impending doom. Not quite sure what that means for Beethoven. It's probably something that involving his hearing or hearing loss. But this can be, for anybody that's playing this, you can turn this into whatever you want to in terms of the emotion. You could have one's own personal, emotional sense of impending doom, or you're really trying to struggle to come to terms with maybe a loss, or something that's you're really struggling to think about deeply. So on this one, sort of that's going to be our backdrop. Something that's sort of happening in the background is that sort of darkness, right? That sense of impending doom, or maybe a sense of something that's going to be coming. That's a sense of loss. Obviously at the end, this is not like a happy ending. Obviously this is a very sad, very dark, kind of very profound piece here. But in the middle, there's a lot of other emotions that are going on in the middle. You have this sense of, heroic, this sort of sense of optimism. There's a wonderful sort of dynamic of tension and ease. Beethoven is a great master of being able to craft a sense of tension. So to the listeners, there's a lot of sense of tension or kind of uncertainty or not sure where this is going, and then also at the right time being able to communicate that sense of ease or being able to kind of relax or feeling comfortable with the piece. So Beethoven is a really great master of having that interplay of both tension and both ease. So those are really key themes when you're playing these. To when you're expressing, really sort of create that sort of tension or building tension, and then at the right moment, sort of giving that sense of relaxation or kind of ease to give a sense of ease to the listener. So when you're playing these, before I go into the next one where we're transitioning to the next measure, what I'm doing is creating a sort of artificial sense of communicative urgency or a really sort of strong desire to sort of communicate. So when I'm slowing up a little bit when you hear these, what that's doing to the listener is sort of communicating a sort of sense of like really wanting to sort of say something and not quite knowing how to say it, but then at the last moment we sort of just like, well, let's say something, let's just get something out, just get and something other than nothing. So when you're playing these, we're sort of slowing up a little bit, and then once you get again sort of an interplay of that tension, that's right before you get to that next measure, sort of creating that sense of tension and then release. So you have that constant sort of rhythmic tension and then release, rhythmic tension. You'll have a lot on the next measure. We have a lot of those. So measure 3. Especially again getting back to that kind of slowing up a little bit for the sake of the emotion rather than the rhythm. So what I'm doing there is really slowing up the rhythm and then kind of returning back to the tempo. When I'm playing these, the right hand melody is going to sound probably dramatically louder than what the left hand is doing. What I'm doing is creating an effect where the left hand is sort of fading into the background. Again, getting back to that sort of backdrop and really letting the right hand come forward or step forward and be the strong presence. So this is a very strong sort of presence. But at the same time, we're also making sure that we want to keep that steady state or that softness. So there's a lot of technique that's sort of going on in the arms. So what I'm doing is, even though I'm creating a strong fingertip, this fingertip is really strong. We want to create that nice core sound, but at the same time, we want to absorb as much of that as possible. So what I'm doing is kind of rotating my wrist. I'm just trying to create as much absorption into that sound as I can. So as soon as I'm hitting the key, I'm actually rotating my wrist out. So if you imagine hitting the note and then sort of actually rotating, or if you have maybe a screw or something, you imagine rotating this direction, hitting the note, coming out, and then also too the energy is kind of flowing through my arm and then kind of moving out the funny bone here. So when I'm playing, nice solid core sound, a rotation, and then also the elbow is kind of coming out as well. So hitting, the energy is moving through, out, and then kind of back down. So this is a very sort of fluid, very graceful arm motion when you're playing these. And all of that is sort of happening at the same time. So down, rotation, and then kind of coming out for these ones. Again, giving that sense of upliftment, really sort of giving a sense of vaulting, moving up for that B flat, and then coming down. Getting back to those emotions, these ones, obviously this is not sad, right? This is F major. This is, somehow we went from this minor to like an F major. So, moving up to that a little bit more of a kind of heroic quality or maybe an optimistic quality. Always Beethoven the optimist. Now we're in this nice sort of happy F major. On this one, when we're transitioning out of that F major, this is, again, master sort of craftsman here, really being able to kind of create that sense of tension. Really, you have a lot of tension. That's a lot of tension that's sort of happening here. You have this here. We have C sharp now, back to D minor, and plus an 5/7 there, and then a concluding interval of that sixth. So when you're playing these, what you're going to notice as well when there's a more emotional intensity is you're going to start to probably lose control, which is why in the beginning we really were stressing having as much control as possible over the notes and rhythm, because as soon as we start to get into that deep emotional expressiveness, we're going to start to lose control over the means. So when things start getting more emotional, we start, okay, where am I again, or what are the notes, or what we start sort of rethinking what the notes are and what these mean, how's my technique, and it really start to you either lose control or you get a much sharper sense of control. Oftentimes, heightened sense of emotions will either you'll start to lose control, or you start to really sort of go in deep to what the meaning is behind the piece and what the notes are. So we'll do 11 again. Also, too, when you're practicing, if you want to sort of hang around and just sort of let the sound linger, you can just stay on one particular note or chord and just sort of let that sound linger. Really, kind of go deep into the sound, the quality of the sound, and what does these sounds sort of mean to you personally. If you want to linger on that as long as you wish, that's totally fine when you're practicing. Obviously, not during a performance, but when you're practicing, you just hang around on these ones. And if you're not sure, what does this note mean, or where are we going with this, you can just hang on that for a little while and kind of think about it. You just replay it. So this can also be a very thought-provoking piece as well. Even though we're going into the emotional expression of it, you can add a lot of kind of deep thinking as well for these ones. So a lot of deep reflective thought in addition to the emotional impact of it. One, two, three, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, bum, 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 1, 2, 3, bum, 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 bum. Okay, so a lot of stuff happens. Even though this is only 2 pages, there's a lot of stuff happening here. So when you first get started, make sure you have nice control over all your notes. When you have really expressive pieces, there's a lot of emotion. Again, getting back to you want to have absolute as much control as you can over the craft, so that you can really go into those emotional states without losing control. That's sort of the game here. So again, first make sure you know all your notes, then go into the rhythm and timing, and then really spend as much time as you can going into the emotional expression of this piece. And then once you kind of are ready for a performance, really sort of get all 3 of those elements to create a nice balance, whatever sort of works for you. Also, too, when you feel like the piece is communicating something to you personally, you tap into your own muse. When Beethoven, is obviously a composer that's very much into one's own muse and sort of what you hear, and is not necessarily composing for somebody else or the aristocracy or whoever Beethoven was sort of writing for. So on this one, obviously a kind of revolutionary type of composer who's able to express a lot of inner feelings. It was very new at the time, but relative to our time, it's not so much. But when you go into the music at that level, just sort of keeping those things in mind and in the background are important. And I think that's about it for this one. So I think we're going to call it good.